So this is something I've wanted to talk about for a few weeks, obviously. First of all, let's just get this out of the way. I just noticed this today. Video on the Xbox situation coming soon. This is, of course, a few weeks ago when some information came out. Apparently, this is going to be a yearly thing because 1 year ago, I'll definitely be doing a video on the Xbox situation. Want to wait for more details first. Just thought that was kind of funny. Basically, over the last few years, there's been some interesting changes that have gone on at Xbox that haven't made a ton of sense to people that follow the brand or have supported the platform, I guess you could call it. But you know, if you've been using a certain console or platform for so many years, that tends to be the one you stick with. You're invested in it, so you kind of want it to succeed and grow and give you more cool things, right? This has always been the case with me and Xbox. Started out with Xbox back in about 2005. I mean, I played it previous to that, but I owned mine in 2005. That was why I got my first job, this one here. And ever since then, every major game I've purchased, other than like a Pokemon game or something, obviously, has been on Xbox, whether it's the original 360, Xbox One, and now the Series consoles. And over the last few years, like I said, there's been, I don't know, some just strange decisions that haven't made a whole lot of sense, especially for a console or a platform that came out of the generation of the Xbox One, with Phil Spencer kind of having a little bit of fire about the brand, trying to bring it back and be more competitive, games, you know, having the more powerful hardware, which they definitely succeeded when it came to the Xbox One X, and the Series X is, you know, the more powerful, flexible system than its competitor, PS5 Pro, notwithstanding, of course. Xbox has not done a mid-generation upgrade this time. But anyways, there's some strange decisions that have come out, and a couple articles here. This one will talk about why those things have been occurring. And again, this was published October 23rd, so this is a few weeks old. However, I kind of wanted to let things settle in a little bit and make a video that covered multiple subjects regarding Xbox. It's kind of like a state of Xbox video at this point. Anyways, so game prices have been on the rise, obviously, for a couple of years now. Started with, I believe it was Sony that upped the prices of their games to $70 at the beginning of this generation, and Xbox was like, no, we're not going to do that. They held off for a while. Eventually, some of their games did start coming out at $70. Of course, they didn't control pricing for third-party titles. They could price them at whatever they like, but most Xbox games were still releasing at $60. Now, the standard for basically everything is $70, other than there's, you know, certain games out there that are not, they're a little bit lower tier. They'll be like $40, $35, or whatever. Then Nintendo came along this summer, released the Switch 2, which I have one now. I actually won one in a contest, and it's pretty cool. Is it worth $500? That's another subject. But I have it for free, so I don't care. They started coming out and putting out games at $80, first-party games, like Mario Kart World, which I have played. It's pretty cool, but in no world is it an $80 game. I would feel hard-pressed to pay that for Forza Horizon. A highly realistic, you know, detailed, incredible amounts of content and things to do, open-world racing game that, you know, would be the grown-up equivalent of Mario Kart World. But anyways, all that's just to talk about, like, the economics of what's been going on lately. And Sony's following suit with the $80 games. Xbox is probably on their way as well. They were trying to hold off on raising their prices, and they've been slowly but surely raising the prices on Game Pass, however. The most recent issue that came up is they created 3 tiers for Xbox Game Pass. There's Game Pass Essential, which is $10 a month. You have about, I think it's like 25 games, something like that. And all your basic services covered, right? Nothing special. $10 used to be what Game Pass as a whole cost. And that just gave you access to whatever they put on the service. And when they released, you know, day one games, you got them there. You don't get that on Essential. Then there's Game Pass Ultimate, which was $20 a month, and that gave you access to everything. All of the Microsoft published, games, Xbox published games came out day and date on Game Pass. Tons of other third-party games did. Tons of really great hit games started coming out on the service. Really an awesome value. It also included the game streaming and various other options as well. It's pretty cool. Then they decided they're going to $30 a month, and that's just when you started at 10 and now you're 3 times more. You go from 20 to 30, and even just that is a huge leap. $20 felt like a premium payment, but it felt worth it. $30, look, you go from like 120 to 240 to 360. Like it just keeps going up and up and up in price, and you're pricing very large swaths of your consumers out of your business, and they were making a lot of money off of Game Pass. Anyways, well, now we kind of have an explanation to some extent on why this is occurring. Inside Xbox's profit pressure, how a 30% margin target is reshaping everything from studios to strategy and upsetting fans. This is, of course, from Windows Central. You can't really see it on the screen there. Sorry about that. But yeah, it's Windows Central, written by Jez Corden. And it's basically, it kind of explains everything. And honestly, for a minute there, I was like, what happened to Phil Spencer? Phil Spencer came into this brand. He's been with Xbox and Microsoft forever when it comes to gaming. And he had so much fire, and he was doing so many great things, and he in some ways kind of turned the brand around, at least some of the perception, right? I'll go into more in a minute, but let's read what's going on financially. Microsoft CEO Amy Hood has forced Xbox to deliver an industry margin far beyond what is typical for gaming in general, which will devastate the business if not rectified soon. Of course, his commentary here is great. Microsoft CFO Amy Hood on stage exploring ways to screw over Xbox customers. All right. He says, over the summer, I said on my Xbox 2 podcast that I'd heard a rumor that Microsoft was forcing Xbox to deliver a 30% profit margin. However, unable to land enough concrete evidence, I'd hoped the insane figure had been hearsay. It must have been, right? Apparently it isn't. Bloomberg reporters Dinah Bass and Jason Schreier, everybody knows who Jason Schreier, just revealed that Microsoft CFO Amy Hood is indeed asking Xbox to meet an accountability margin of 30%, which is far, far in excess of reasonable targets for the video game industry, and in particular, the gaming hardware industry. Over the past few years, Microsoft's gaming division has undergone some insane and self-destructive transitions. The link preview says Microsoft announces layoffs at gaming division, 1900 jobs cut, Activision Blizzard Games, blah, blah, blah. I guess that's a part of it, but cutting studios, slashing marketing budgets, and sprinting to release games on rival platforms to the detriment of its own. Microsoft has also rapidly hiked prices, harming customers, while laying off literal thousands, reducing any semblance of goodwill Microsoft had left to zero. The changes, according to Bloomberg, coincide with Microsoft CFO Amy Hood taking a greater role in the gaming business at Xbox. The 30% profit demands a far beyond industry averages, which range in the low 20s at best. I've been writing for a while about how my sources have been blaming Amy Hood for the major issues at Xbox right now, as Microsoft doubles down on short-termism and shareholder pandering over long-term goals and customer feedback. For a long time, Microsoft was listening heavily to fan feedback. Now, thanks to Microsoft CFO Amy Hood, it only listens to shareholder greed. Cool picture, actually. I think that's from an interview or something. The cancellation of promising games like Perfect Dark, Contraband, and others is a direct result of Xbox lead Phil Spencer, Sarah Bond, and Tim Stewart attempting to balance Microsoft's corporate demands without tanking the entire business. The amount of strain this arbitrary goal has put on Xbox cannot be overstated, as staffers, customers, and even third-party developers feel the gradual toxification of the Xbox brand. So this is what I'm talking about right here. Again, every time they made one of these weird decisions, the canceling of games that looked like they could be big deals. I mean, Perfect Dark, whether you thought it looked incredible or not, the gameplay looked fairly solid. They did show us gameplay. The gameplay looked fairly solid. The character was a little but this was supposed to be the product of this big time, quote unquote, 4A studio that they had put together. They had brought in some really great talent for this studio, big time names that had worked on really good titles in the past. And it was like, we're supposed to get the next huge Xbox exclusive games, which nothing is exclusive anymore. And Perfect Dark was going to be one of those. And I was excited for it. Look, the female character was quite unattractive. I agree, especially considering the history of Perfect Dark. She's always been this like super hot vixen type character. But it was a first person shooter. So in the end, you'd probably see her in like some cutscenes or whatever. The gameplay looked pretty cool, and honestly, with the feedback that was given, they could have fixed it as well. But no, canceled. How much money did they spend on this studio and on developing this game to then throw it away? Contraband was supposed to be another one. We saw a teaser for that, if I recall. I mean, going back, there's been multiple games. What was that one called? Scalebound. Scalebound looked incredible, and the type of game that could, like, almost a Capcom-ish Monster Hunter, not necessarily the same exact format of game, but something with that aesthetic in a lot of ways that could compete with those studios and the types of things they put out. But anyways, in response, Microsoft issued the following statement, which doesn't really address the chaos the firm has embraced over the past couple of years. Microsoft has provided the following statement, blah, blah, blah. We take a long-term view in how we run our business and set goals. Okay. We aim high but stay flexible, knowing that success doesn't look the same across every project or priority. We look at the business as a whole, balancing creativity, innovation, and sustainability across a diverse portfolio of offerings. As with any creative business, sometimes that means making hard decisions and stopping work on things that are no longer working for a variety of reasons. It's just money. That's all it is. And shifting resources toward the projects that are more aligned with our direction and priorities. The money. Now, again, I say this like it's a bad thing. Money is not a bad thing, right? And if you want to make money, that's not a bad thing, because that means you need to cater to your customers, especially in a business like entertainment. Movie studios have figured this out. Many video game developers have figured this out. You know, TV shows, etc. They start to learn, well, we can spend a bunch of money on making crap, and then people don't pay for the crap. We lose money, so we make what they want, right? The drive to make money in entertainment is a very important one. And unfortunately, Microsoft has kind of stopped caring about that. It's weird. And while each team and project might vary from each other, one goal we share across the whole business is to make great games and deliver experiences our players will enjoy for years to come. Okay, well then why aren't you doing that? It's, again, I like what he called it, short-termism. So here's to cover some of the stuff I talked about. Over the summer, Microsoft attempted to raise the base price of its games to $80, a move that was met with significant public backlash. Instead, they decided to rework the Xbox Game Pass tiers, targeting the most sticky and dedicated Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscribers with an extortionate 50% price hike. Xbox Series X and S game consoles have also seen aggressive price increases, and even Xbox developmental kits as well, which I'll always find weird because that's like how you get people to make content for your... Yeah, obviously you might want to sell them so that you're not losing money on them, but geez. This part right here, just full disclosure, I didn't cancel my Game Pass. I downgraded. So my Game Pass Ultimate was about to have that access that I wanted, or that I had at that $20 level, was about to become $30. And I was like, no. And I'm not even keeping the $20 level because that really doesn't get me what I want out of this in most ways. And honestly, stuff's expensive. The economy isn't that great. So $10 it is, just so I can keep my multiplayer access, you know? The inconsistent messaging and seemingly desperate price hikes have people questioning whether or not Microsoft is deliberately sabotaging Xbox, and it certainly seems that way. Microsoft has been forced to repeatedly come out and deny that it is looking to kill Xbox hardware and deny that retailers are canceling orders. This one's interesting because this last month, I saw a headline, and when I say saw a headline, I clicked on it, read it. They did say that the Xbox consoles were the highest money makers, whereas Nintendo Switch 2 still dominated in actual units sold. But yeah, they're making money off the consoles, so they're still selling them at some level. With Activision Blizzard, Microsoft's gaming division surpassed Windows itself in the firm's diversified business. With the AI boom fueling Microsoft's share price, CEO Satya Nadella is enjoying a near $100 million pay packet in stock incentives, which preclude gaming from the equation. So he doesn't need this isn't even based on whether gaming does anything good or not. With analysts and speculators trying to figure out whether or not the AI boom is actually predicting a gigantic AI bust, you'd think Microsoft would want to ensure its diversified business model remains healthy to reduce exposure. Apparently not. Basically what he's saying is that, okay, you're investing a lot in the AI thing and you're thinking you're going to make a ton of money off of it, but you want to reduce your exposure in case that busts, so be good at other stuff too, such as gaming. The sprint of short-term thinking and anti-customer ideology will not only fail to deliver its desired 30% profit margins, but it will serve only to crater the only viable consumer brand Microsoft has left. When will the insane greed? And there's a fact here. According to reports, he set the target for Xbox to deliver 30% profit margin, which is unusually high for a gaming division. This aggressive goal is reshaping how they operate, from pricing to partnerships. All right, so this is the part that's important. Why is a 30% margin considered insane? Most gaming platforms operate on much thinner margins, especially when factoring in hardware costs, game development, and subscription services. A 30% margin suggests major cost-cutting and revenue-boosting measures, which can disrupt studios, developers, and consumers. So, in the past, with basically every generation of gaming, except for typically Nintendo, as a big exception, the Xbox 360, the PS3, the Xbox One, PS4, even the Series X and PS5, and going back to the original Xbox, PS2, and etc. These game consoles were sold at a loss. You were trying to make sure people could actually afford to buy the console. So say the Xbox 360, what was it, 300, 350? I can't remember exactly. It was somewhere in that range, right? It was not at the 500. Oh, I think it was about $400 at the time, because I remember when they announced the price for the PS3 being $599 US. It was dramatically more expensive. I believe like $200 more expensive. A $600 game console, especially back then. You know, if you adjust for inflation, that would probably be a lot closer to $1,000 now. But it was a huge flop for PlayStation to begin with, until they started like doing new models of the console, dropping prices, got a pretty consistent library built up. They struggled. And the Xbox 360, which launched at a lower price and had some pretty good games and etc. But like, you've always sold these things at a lower price than what you were producing them for, in hopes that you get plenty of them on the market, and then people buy games for them where you get a bigger profit margin. You get the games, you get the services, etc., and you start making money there. Then after a couple years, typically a few years, 2 to 3 years into a console generation, the components become cheaper. It becomes easier to produce them over time. You don't spend as much manufacturing the devices, and so you start to make a little bit more money off of them. And then you would usually pass some of those savings down to the consumer, release like a slimline model, and basically bring the profile of the console back up by going, hey, look, now you can get a slim version of that same console. So some people that already own it would want to, quote unquote, upgrade to the slim version. People who had not considered it yet might see the slim version and be like, oh, now I want one. Or because you're now able to drop the price $50 to $100 at this point, you suddenly start seeing more people go adopt the console. You slowly but surely accelerate growth until about 3-4 years in or so, and then you usually start to see a slowdown. That's about when, at least with the 360, they considerably dropped the price. There was a time where the GameCube back in the day was being sold for like $50 or something, but that was normally how it always worked. every generation. Slowly but surely, the cost of production came down. So you pass that on the consumer. More people would continue to buy your console as the years went on. So you had a broader base to buy games. And then in the case of like, the last 20 years or so, pay for services on those consoles as well. This all completely changed this generation. There has essentially, the Xbox essentially launched with a slimline model, same with PS5 sort of, and they considered those their cheaper versions. But those are the less desirable versions. The Series S is like considerably less powerful than the Series X. Still a good console and a budget alternative, but your flagship console is a Series X. That's the one you want people buying for the power, for all the features, etc., right? It is over $500. It costs more now than it did when it launched. I don't think we've ever seen that in a game generation before. Same thing with PlayStation. It's not an Xbox thing. PlayStation actually raised the prices on theirs before Xbox did on the PS5. And I'm not sure that this is something we've ever seen before. It's unprecedented. We are 5 years into this console generation, and prices have gone up. There's not really any slimline models like that have been really, like the Series X, for instance, should have gotten a slimline model, where honestly I kind of imagined it looking a lot more like the Steam box or whatever you want to call it, the Steam machine, being like a half-size little Xbox cube without a disc drive or something, but with the same level of performance. And then that could have launched for $400, and then you drop the price of the big one, the fat, the Xbox Series X fat, you could drop that price down to like $300. And then you could almost push the Series S completely out of the market, not even worry about it. You could drop that to like $150 or something, right? So you would have like so much more access. You'd have people that might want that Series X Slim, and they're willing to go dish out and upgrade to get it, or finally, dip into the console. And now you suddenly have 2 levels more that are cheaper, but that never happened. It's been really weird. So this is the explanation for everything. Phil Spencer's not off his rocker. Sarah Bond, Tim Stewart, these people, like, they've done some pretty decent stuff at Xbox. And I think until this was imposed on them, they were doing pretty good. They were doing some smart things. But this is unrealizable. And I don't know if Microsoft will figure that out and pull back on it a little bit and give them some leeway again. How about 20%? Something like that, right? We want this brand to stick around. Well, they are working on new hardware. That's the thing. It's not like they have abandoned the console. They told us 2 years ago that there was a new console on the way, and then a year ago that was confirmed, and earlier this year they even announced the partnership with AMD for a chipset. So by the time they do that, this is something I think that the next Xbox is launching next year, not 2027. These publications and stuff always seem to have their timelines off. They don't pay attention, I feel like. Again, I don't have insider information. I could be wrong. But when you pay attention, usually by the time they announce the partnership for chipsets, it feels like that the console is closer than further. And considering everything, next year would be 6 years into this generation. Next year would be 25 years of Xbox. 2026 would be 25 years since the Xbox brand launched in 2001. I feel like the next wave of Xbox consoles or products are coming next fall. It just feels like it's that much closer. The fact that they told us already 2 years ago, officially, that they were working on next generation hardware. They reaffirmed it again last year, and now this year, earlier this year, the AMD partnership was announced. You don't start doing that, I feel like, until it's around the corner. And around the corner can be a year and a half out, whatever. But still, I think it is coming next year, and it'll be interesting to see if, as some have claimed, they're going to stay in the console business but move into like the premium console era. We'll see. The things that I have read and seen have said essentially the next generation Xbox could be 2-tiered again, where your flagship version is essentially like a combination Xbox but also Windows machine that can run other storefronts like Steam, etc., and be able to play those games on the device like it's a PC, because it basically will be I think that the Xbox skinning of that Asus ROG Ally was like an experiment in that direction, right? To show that that could be done. Okay, well, we can have an Xbox, we can have a Windows box that runs under an Xbox UI, which I don't know why they haven't been doing this already, but have a Windows box that runs under an Xbox UI and have that be our game console that sits and plugs into your TV. And then they would have a second level one, which would be the little bit more affordable model, less premium, that would be just a game console, just an Xbox console that plugs into place. We'll have to see. That's the what I'm reading on stuff. Now, just to continue, I don't want to run this video way too long, but Xbox Series X 5th anniversary, this just happened 6 days ago. In fact, just a couple days ago was the 24th anniversary of Xbox in general. A great console until Microsoft lost interest, and this is actually based on what we just read, kind of true. 5 years into a hardware generation that has alienated Xbox's core fan base, failed to improve on Xbox One's dismal market share, is widely considered a debacle, Microsoft swears that it still cares about making Xbox consoles. What it's working on next barely sounds like a console at all. We kind of covered this a little. A very premium, very high-end, Windows-based device that has as much, if not more, in common with an enthusiast gaming PC, likely with a price tag to match. Whatever Xbox will be in the future, it won't be recognizable as the mainstream console brand that has consistently challenged, if never quite surpassed, PlayStation for past 24 years. PS3 did eventually outsell the Xbox 360, but in mind share, in branding, in how everyone remembers that generation, it was the generation of the Xbox 360. It took all the way until basically the generation was over for PlayStation to end up surpassing its sales. So, yeah, let's not pretend that they didn't accomplish something there with the Xbox 360. That was a major one. But the irony is that this fate has befallen Xbox on the heels of what might be its best console hardware ever, or at least since the ugly but impressively spec'd beast that launched Microsoft's console initiative in November 2001. The title ought to belong to Xbox 360, with transformative online features that were undoubtedly the high point for the brand, but the console's disastrous failure rate due to poor heat management, which led to the infamous Red Ring of Death error, disqualifies. No, it actually doesn't. That's not how that works. First of all, those were replaceable. You could get them fixed, etc. You could send them in. Oftentimes, they would send you a brand new console. That does not actually make it its worst hardware ever. You know what the flaw with the Xbox 360 was a little bit of the die, or what? Not the die, but the glue that held the processor on, and that was primarily an issue at production, right? Like, the actual architecture of that console was actually really well thought out, really fantastic, and the whole overall design, aesthetic, everything, great piece of hardware. Its one flaw was not something that Microsoft screwed up. Basically, there was just it needed a little bit more to hold the processor on the board. That's it. Anyways, and the less said about the misbegotten Xbox One and its hastily abandoned ambitions to be a multimedia set-top box, the better. Well, again, this is a misinterpretation. The Xbox One actually had pretty decent hardware. Both the Xbox One and PS4 were behind the curve at launch. And I don't mean the bleeding edge curve of PC stuff, right? I mean the high-ish end that you're going to get for a $500 console that typically outpaces what you would spend $500 on a PC. You're not going to buy a $500 PC that has the performance of a launch console, right? Typically. But the Xbox One and PS4 were actually pretty behind the curve when they came out. Xbox One's problem was a branding presentation problem. It wasn't necessarily the hardware itself. Especially when the Xbox One X came out, that thing was incredible. Like, I still think about that in some ways I liked better than the Series X when it came to how that thing was put together. But anyways, considered in isolation, the Xbox Series X and S are great machines. Delivering on the promise of the Xbox One X mid-generation upgrade, Microsoft's engineers and designers hit every mark. The consoles are reliable, fast, and seamlessly easy to use. Quick Resume, better implemented than PlayStation 5's alternative, is a quality of life feature that genuinely improves the quality of your life. I really like Quick Resume. great feature. I don't use it all the time, but there are games that, for instance, don't necessarily have a save point where you want them. And if you hit the guide button, it says quick resume up in the screen. You're pretty much safe to do that, hit the home button and go play other things and then come back to it. As long as you don't clear it out of that cache or put too many things into quick resume. I still have a game right now in my quick resume that's been there for well over a year that I should probably go back and continue playing. But the controllers have been perfected. Both consoles run silently and have been thoughtfully designed and updated with power efficiency in mind. Yeah, they're an incredibly impressive piece of console hardware, and they actually look pretty decent for it. The Xbox Series X matches the PS5 for power almost exactly, and it does so in a chassis that's less bulky, better packaged, and to my eyes at least, much more attractive with its clean, minimalist lines. They go on to whine about ultimately something of disappointment in terms of pure power, delivering neither frame rates nor raw 4K. I don't even know what they're talking about. I understand that everything's not at native 4K, but I rarely encounter something that's not running at 60 FPS or whatever. And the vast majority of people don't even have a TV screen or something that runs 120. For Microsoft, a software company that had been playing catch up to Sony's vast experience in consumer electronics for 2 decades, this represented a kind of triumph. Then there was the Xbox Series S. The legacy of this junior console is complicated. They go on to talk about how like some developers didn't really like having to develop for it, but it's because it had compromised power and storage. But it was genuinely affordable, appealing, simple entry point for next-gen gaming, and a gorgeous box about the size of an original PlayStation 2. So the problem is they basically gave up on it. Again, this is actually this Microsoft idea was ahead of its time. Well, look at what we do now with our consoles, our TVs, and everything. The digital on-demand streaming games, streaming services, you know, using it as a entertainment hub and all that stuff was what they were doing with Xbox One. So the other thing those executives were doing was buying game studios left, right, and center. In theory, this should have helped Xbox Series X cause. An ill-advised retreat from first-party development under a previous administration had left the Xbox One stable of exclusive games looking rather bare, and here was a chance to bounce back, but it didn't pan out. Due to ever-lengthening development times and endemic mismanagement... Oh, this just talks about the layoffs and all that. Perfect Dark again. At Microsoft, games from most new acquisitions didn't materialize for years or at all. The grandest of the pre-Series X acquisitions, Bethesda, was embarrassingly obliged to release 2 timed exclusive for PS5 before it could get around to serving Xbox with a semi-exclusive, and when it did, with 2023's Starfield, it was something of a damp squib. I still love Starfield, but whatever. But Microsoft's ambitions, fueled by the pandemic gaming boom, only grew. Just over a year into the generation, it announced its intention to buy Activision Blizzard, and with it, many of the biggest game franchises in the world, including Call of Duty. This was the kind of console war-ending megaton that had been the stuff of fanboy dreams for decades. But if this gigantic $68.7 billion deal did contribute to the end of the console war, it did so in favor of the other side. Yeah, so this is something I've always wanted to talk about. Forza Horizon 6 is going to come to PlayStation, Indiana Jones and Great Circle. That would have been a fantastic exclusive to have. Starfield, like Halo, the Halo remake. I don't know if they show a picture here, but that's coming to PlayStation. So essentially, when they say they lost interest, they stopped wanting to try. And now it's like, well, you know what? We can just make back all this money by putting all our stuff everywhere. Problem is, when you do that, you have nothing left to offer for your hardware, for your platform. People will just buy. You just become a game publisher. You just become Sega. Just really big Sega with deep pockets. And I just don't see this console war thing that everybody cries about, wanting console wars to be over and all this stuff. It's like, you do realize that the greatest eras of gaming, the early to mid 90s and the early to mid 2000s, these are probably the times where people think of the most fondly when they think of game consoles, the games that came out and all that sort of thing, the culture around gaming. Nintendo versus Sega, Xbox versus PlayStation. We don't even bring up the Wii because it was its own thing separate of it. It wasn't even a competition. It was just something that people would also buy, basically. Or people who weren't going to buy either other console, that's what they bought. What made them great? Was those console wars? Was people competing for your dollar? When Sega and Nintendo were going at it, when they were, neck and neck with each other between the Genesis and Super Nintendo, etc., putting out games, making jokes about each other, being, very cutthroat type stuff going on in the 90s. And then in the mid 2000s, it was kind of similar when it came to the Xbox 360 and the PS3. When these brands hate each other and want your money, that's good for you. That is good for you. Because they're competing against each other to get your dollar, to get you invested in them. Now, does it mean, okay, I can only play this game if I buy an Xbox? I can only play this game if I buy a PlayStation? Yeah, but that's the point. Some people are only going to be able to afford one console, and so those consoles fight over your dollar. They put out Gears of War, Halo 3, Crackdown. PlayStation has God of War, and they try to... They secured, what was it, Assassin's Creed as a launch exclusive. There were so many things that were like you had to choose from as a consumer, but it also meant that they were putting more into trying to tempt you over to that side. You got better quality games, you got better quality services, cooler hardware, cooler branding. Now we have incredibly expensive games, incredibly expensive hardware, incredibly expensive services. Most of the stuff that comes out from AAA these days, I mean, there's exceptions, there's still really good stuff out there, is absolute garbage. It's broken, it's incomplete, it needs patches for 2 years to be good. I love Cyberpunk 2077, but it's a great example, right? Then you have just so much less incentive for these brands, for these companies, whether it's a third party, Xbox, PlayStation, whatever, to put the same level of effort in to earn your dollar. And that's bad for us. So we would all be better off if the console wars were still a thing. By trying to get out of that, essentially they've all kind of diluted the market, and they've consolidated power away from the consumer and to these brands at the top that all just kind of sell whatever they're going to sell at you, and you really don't have a lot of other choices anymore. You had a choice before. Do I want Xbox? Do I want PlayStation? Do I want Nintendo? Do I want Sega, Atari, whatever it was? There was you made choices, right? It was up to you. Does this console have something I want more than the other? And what we're seeing now is with Microsoft, and this has been almost the entire generation since they basically gave up on exclusives, and the lack of investment in things like exclusives on the Xbox One. Well, they're not learning. They're not learning. When they were doing their best, when they were at their peak, is when they focused on those things, like historically the way that it always worked. So this video has gone on way too long. I just wanted to kind of give my thoughts on the current state of Xbox and why we're seeing the things we're seeing. It's not that suddenly Phil Spencer is evil or became really stupid. It's that corporate pressure from above to just make more money is pushing them to make decisions that don't make sense and are bad for the consumer. And in the end, will probably be bad for the Xbox brand.